who are the people in my life throughout my whole life that the next time I see them, I don't want to be at my funeral.
I'm so grateful to have one of my great mentors, Dino Watt, on today. We're going to be talking about a factor in the way that he speaks and the way that he connects with people. It's called edutainment, not just education, not just entertainment, but merging the two. And one of the things I think he is uniquely qualified to talk about, because you're such an amazing consultant, such an amazing leader in the business arena and speaking. So, Dino, first tell us a little bit about your background, why we need to listen to you, why you're such a passionate speaker.
Well, your second question there, why would anybody listen to me? I have no idea why anybody would listen to me. My kids don't, so why should
Oh,
anybody
yeah.
else? It says, no, so I've been in one way, shape, or form getting on stages since I was in the third grade. I've loved it. I love the connection you get to make with an audience, the story you get to tell. And I started really pursuing it in a theatrical way, probably when I was about 12 years old. Excuse me. I came from a family where my dad was like, yeah, boys don't really do that. You should be doing sports and stuff. But when I turned 12, my parents had already divorced, and my mom was like, yeah, go for it. So I was a dancer, a singer, a performer in any way, shape, or could. And I wasn't great at really all of them. I was a pretty good dancer, not a great singer. Probably could have been better if I disciplined myself. Um, Decent actor. I was in all the plays in high school and everything, but I just love performing. I love being on stage. I love what we can do. And speaking as a profession wasn't something that I ever knew was an option. I thought you were either in Hollywood or not.
Right.
And at one point, after having 3 kids in 3 years with my wife, I didn't have them myself. My
Right.
wife had them. We I just kind of really realized trying to be an actor, or performer in Hollywood and raising a family wasn't very conducive. And so I left it. I left the profession altogether. I said, okay, I'm gonna find a real job. And I was working in the movie industry at the time anyway, so I just figured I'd go full bore into that. And I was miserable. I was not happy. I was bitter towards my kids. And one day I was at a real estate convention and I saw a gentleman talking about taxes from the stage, and he was funny and engaging. And suddenly in the audience, I realized, wait a minute, he's on a stage performing. I'm in the audience. He's going to get paid. I can do that. I want to learn how to do that. And so I started my pursuit of everything I could to learn how to be on stage, and taking my acting background of stagecraft and then the other side of it of like the science of speaking. And then I saw one other leap, which was there are plenty of speakers out there who love to talk about stuff,
Yeah.
but how do we transform the audience? How do we give them the right information, not my information necessarily, but the information they need to hear or they want to hear in order to transform their lives? And so I started that pursuit, and that's what's kept me going for the last 20 years.
I love that. Great answer. Great answer. So one of the things that I really admire about you, I've gone through your classes. I've been there when you recorded with Renatus. I love being in the audience and not feeling like we're separate, but
Yeah.
feeling like you bring us in. So
Oh,
just,
that's great.
how do you do that? How do you help someone feel so connected while you're speaking?
Well, number one is I think you really have to be as vulnerable and real as possible on stage. Unfortunately, I do see a lot of speakers where they have their choreographed pieces and, oh, this is where I raise my hands and point to his, or pointing to my head and my heart, and like stuff that you would not, how you would not speak to a friend. I
Yeah.
would not be sitting with you across the dinner being like, so then I thought to myself, what should I do? And, and
Pageant style, yeah.
yeah, it's way more choreographed and convoluted, really. And so that was one thing that I really wanted to make sure that I could be vulnerable and real with people on the stage. Now, yes, there are times where I over exaggerate my kids' tantrums or, whatever, but it helps with the storytelling. The other side of it is One of the mentors I learned from, Blair Singer, who's just an amazing facilitator, he really focused a lot on pattern interrupts and helping your brain come back to what we're talking about. As you and I are doing this podcast, there will be people who'll be listening, but something I say, something you say, something they see on the street as they're walking on their treadmill or around their block or whatever, it will trigger a thought that will then sometimes take them down a rabbit hole. And it could be a thought of my grocery list, or, oh yeah, I got to get that mole checked on my back, or whatever it is. And so knowing the brain does that, your job as a speaker is to be able to interrupt that as much as you possibly can. So it sounds like we're having a conversation because I keep pulling you back to my thing. So whether it's a high five, or whether it's repeating what I have to say, or filling in the blank, or even just some sort of shift in the energy in the room, helps the brain come back too. So now you're connected with me because I'm continually calling you back to me, as opposed to expecting you to listen to my diatribe for the next 90 minutes.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think is really, really brilliant that you just brought up, these pattern interrupts, they can come in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Like I remember sometimes people like stomp on the stage, or they'll do a quick clap, or they'll have people get up. One of the things I love that you've done, I've seen it probably 3 different times when I've heard you speak, is you actually have people get up and dance, or you'll
Oh yeah.
have people do something drastically different than they normally would do sitting in a speech. So what are some of your maybe top 3 or 4 favorite ways that you add in this entertainment factor to uh to your
Great.
speeches?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the easiest one is move, and I go extreme move with dance, but not always. Like sometimes it'll just be, hey, you have 90 seconds to go and meet as many people as you possibly can, but when you give them a compliment, which you inevitably will, or you receive a compliment, you can't bat it back like, hey, I like your hair. Oh, yours too. You can't do that. And you can't just ignore it, or bypass it with, oh, I love your hair. Oh, well, I was driving with the window down. And like, you can't just dismiss it. So it makes people engaged. So that's one of the easiest ones to do. And it's uncomfortable. And I love uncomfortable without being too extreme uncomfortable.
Right.
Number two, like you said, it is dancing. I love music. I think music is key to any event. I always find it interesting when I walk into events and they are like, they have massage music playing on the background or whatever. It's just like, wow, why do you want to put people to sleep before we even get started? So movement in the middle of it, so some sort of music. And then the third one is also super simple, which is I do a lot, which is the high five, right? It's just like the moment you have people turn to each other, give each other a high five and tell them they're awesome, it changes the energy. It just increases it so much.
Yeah, I love it. It's like very simple, but we sometimes discount things because they're too simple. And
Oh, for sure.
man, that's so effective though, because you think about it, you can't not pay attention to a high five, otherwise you might get like smacked in the face or something. So
Well, we've
completely
been
fair.
taught since we were kids, like, what's one of the first things that you teach a kid to do to communicate or connect with them? It's nowadays either a fist bump
Yeah,
or a
right,
high five, right?
right.
And it's actually a safe thing. So one of the things that you're, I don't know, you're a little bit younger than me, obviously, but
Yeah,
my generation was the generation of go hug them, go give them a hug, go give them a hug. And for some kids, that's uncomfortable. And we're learning more and more how we really probably shouldn't be doing that parenting wise, of forcing kids to hug people they don't know, right? Because it's
yeah,
weird. But high five, almost every kid will give somebody else a high five because it's something, it's separate. Anyways, the point is it brings us back to a fun thing. It's Have you ever had a negative high five? Like, hey, let's high five on how crappy that was. No, it's
okay,
always a great thing. And if you're in sports, you're always having your hands up excited. So in body language, where your hands go show your level of excitement.
yeah.
So if you are somebody who's going to be putting it up like this, you're talking, people see that excitement out of you and the energy gets increased. So super important.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a subtle thing, but when your hands are higher, you've got the more excitement in your voice, and also you'll see this in like in crowds as well. So when people are like, "Oh, that was amazing," they go
Yeah.
up. It's something that we we sometimes forget how much that body language is communicating to us
Yeah.
because it's
Well,
just
the
background.
Well, the state is more important than the story or the script, right? So the state of being able to, the state of your body. And so hands is a very simple thing. And I think what we do when we're like tired or such, like, oh, okay, I want to get my thing.
Yeah.
We always bring our hands up. So that's a really easy way to bring the energy up too. I watch this and your hands command people to do stuff, which is really interesting. There's a great speaker. His name is Vin, and he has this little trick that I've been trying out at the end of his speeches to guarantee a standing ovation. He just does a little step back and like just a thank you, but he brings his hands up like that to the audience, and the audience stands up because
Yeah.
he's just like, thank you. And and it just commands him to. So I've been practicing. It's been pretty crazy to see. I'm like, oh, that's fun. I
That's
mean,
good.
they're already giving me a standing ovation, so I don't have to make them do that, but
I love that. But you think of it, a lot of times you're giving them permission to do something.
totally.
It's not just, hey, you can do it. It's, I'm giving you permission as a speaker to talk for 90 seconds and get to know all these different people,
Yep.
or you give a high five. The fact that you give them the permission, that allows them to have a little bit more fun. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of this edutainment idea. Because some speakers, like I don't know about you guys, how many of you ever went through a college class and maybe you didn't even have one engaging question the entire class? It was just, here's the PowerPoint, here's the PowerPoint.
Mhm.
It's just, you feel like you die inside a little bit. But when you have a really engaging instructor, you have a really engaging speaker like yourself, Dino, it's like suddenly you think
Hmm.
different thoughts. They take you on a journey, and it allows you to have an experience that's positive and go through all these different emotions rather than just here's the information. So
Well, it's called data dumping in my world. I call it data dumping or verbal vomit. And the challenge is that if you're dealing with professionals, I give anybody who stands in front of a crowd a huge credibility, right? Like you're taking a risk in doing that. And the challenge is that we as creators, as content creators, have so much data that we want to share. The things that it's like, what's the one thing that's going to like tip over them over for their success? And I know, and like Renatus, right? We want to find the one thing that's going to hook people in to listen to our message so we can actually share more and we can have people join in with us. So the ability to do that is really challenging. But if you don't have some sort of restraint on your content, you're going to overwhelm people. And I work with a lot of doctors, a lot of doctors. And what I'll see all the time is you'll have somebody giving a speech. Maybe it's scheduled a 45-minute speech and they have 230 slides. And I'm just like, typically you're thinking about a slide per minute is what you want to average.
yeah.
When you have that much stuff, you cannot not overwhelm them with data. And the problem is that we already forget about 75% of what we learn within 24 hours if we don't review it or teach it to someone else, which
Mm.
most people aren't going home and reviewing their notes right away. So you need to break it down into small little chunks and give them just the best little bits that makes them want to know more.
Mm.
As a speaker, as a trainer, as a facilitator, as a presenter, if you're in front of your Sunday school room, right? Or if you're in front of your team as a CEO, your job is to give them the data they need and then have them have a desire to want to ask more questions, whether that's you after the fact, whether that's there in the room, because the more questions they ask, so questions are our currency for great conversations.
Ooh,
But most people make statements on each other, right? We statement all over each other instead of, all right, let's talk about questions. Because I can get to know more of what you know and what you want to know when you ask questions. So,
I love that. Well, here's a question for you. What is one of the best questions that you've ever been asked?
um, what's one of the best questions I've ever been asked? The other day, I was on a podcast and I asked 4 questions at the end of my podcast. Excuse me, for everybody. And the person who I asked the question to reversed it and asked me. Like he answered it, but then he said, "What about you?" And the question is, what experience before you die, what experience do you hope to have before that last day on earth? And I ask it of everybody, but he turned around and asked it of me. And I was like, oh man, that's so interesting because I have so many experiences there. Um, that was a really good way to use my own question on me. I think the most important question I've ever been asked really is something that I still ask myself and I still ask audiences. And when I'm stuck, it helps me the most getting out of my stuckness, which is very simple. What do you want?
Mm.
And I have a lot of wishes. I think a lot of us have a lot of wishes. Like I wish I would wake up tomorrow and have six-pack abs. Like that would be really cool. I say I want them, but I don't because I don't pursue them. And I know the things I need to do to pursue them. I would like them. It would be cool. It'd be nice, but I don't really want it. So getting really clear on what do I want. So as for example, I have this new program coming out in a month for
Mhm.
speakers, and there's been a lot of that. There's been a lot of, okay, what do we want? What do we want them to get? What do we want them to feel? What do we want them to walk away from? If they never saw us or engaged with us again in their life, what do we want? And it helps you really kind of clarify things. And I don't think a lot of people ask themselves that question as much.
Yeah.
They talk about what we don't want
Right.
a lot. I don't want this. I don't want that. But what do you want?
Such a
That's
great.
that's a hard question for a lot of people to ask, answer.
And then the experience question, like what experience do you want to have before you die? That's a deep question. I might need a,
I've been
a-
doing a lot of deep questions lately for myself. On the same note, I was at and I'll just say this for the audience here, just to give you something to think about. I was at my mastermind a couple of days ago, and I was in Virginia Beach, and one of the other participants was talking about how something she's starting to do with people. They're basically starting to do living funerals for people who get a late stage cancer notice or a terminal diagnosis, and so they're doing living funerals so your friends and family can come and see you and talk to you while you're alive, as opposed to waiting until you're passed and everybody shows up, right? And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting thing. But what it made me think was, who are the people in my life throughout my whole life that the next time I see them, I don't want to be at my funeral. Meaning, I don't want the next time I see that person to be at my funeral. I want to see them before that. I want to connect with them. I want to say thank you. Such a tangent, but I'll just share this for anybody who needs this. I got the chance to do that for three of my teachers throughout my life that really have meant a lot to me. So my third grade teacher who put me on stage for the first time, my choir teacher in seventh grade, who was the first person I ever joined a choir with, my drama teacher in high school, and my choir teacher in high school. And I got them all together at a local restaurant where I grew up in California. And I got to sit with them and tell them how much I love them and thank them for being the part of my life when I needed it most. And for guiding me onto the stage and making me find this place that was such a sanctuary for me. Such an honor and a blessing to be able to do that. But who else in my life in that? So that's a long answer to your short question, but hopefully somebody got something out of that.
I got something out of it. That's excellent. It makes me want to go and reach out to some more of my teachers because we don't know how much time we have on that game clock. And often we play as if we have, the whole game, but we might be in the fourth quarter and we never know.
Never know.
And we don't know
Yeah.
what people's game clock is either. Like they might be in that fourth quarter. They might be a 2-minute warning. We don't know.
Yeah.
So precious. So
Yep.
let's talk about this as well. So one of the things that I really admire about you is your infectious energy. So how
Hmm.
do you hone your energy and focus it so that your audience can be taken on that journey? Because I know a lot of people have frenetic energy,
Yeah.
and in acting, it's so important to harness it and focus it.
That's a really great question. I think for me, the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was I am really much an introvert. When I'm on stage, I'm an extrovert. When I'm in groups of people, I can be an extrovert, but I'm not necessarily going to be the life of the party. Like you're probably not going to know I was there unless I'm doing something specific. I'm teaching a line dance or something like that. Because I'm pretty much I like to observe a lot. And so I think I save a lot of it for on stage. Now, I want to preface that with this is I have this thing around you have to be the same on stage as you are off stage. You can't have two different personas. And there are definitely people who have totally different personas on or off stage. I I feel like my job, I think going back again to the vulnerability is just to be authentically me. And I really do want to contribute to people's lives. I really do want to see people do better. I really do want to see people have amazing relationships. And I come from that place of, man, like you have no idea. And I deal with a lot of people who work in jobs, right? They're employees, they're team members. And I just want them to know that there's so much available to them, not so much more. If they're happy with what they're doing in life or in their job, that's great. But in life, there's so much more they can have and be and do and experience. And I don't know if I grew up that way, believing that. I don't know if I was given that same type of idea. My parents were really loosey goosey when it comes to, did I just say loosey goosey? How old am I? Wow, I might as well say some other old timey phrases. Anyways, they were not the parents who were like, "You're going to school, you're going to college, you're doing this, you're doing that." They were just kind of like, "All right, figure out what you want to do and like, go for it."
Yeah.
So I think I having that same kind of feeling of I want people to feel open and vulnerable and not afraid of having that conversation. Even my consulting, I talk
Mm.
about this all the time, is I when I go in, you're not gonna have team members who are gonna end up after talking to me crying. I'm not gonna make anybody feel terrible about themselves. I want to uplift you and make you feel better. And one last thing on that is I think I've had a lot of training. I remember once we both know Clint Pulver, and he was talking about how working in schools is such a great training ground for speakers.
Mm.
Well, mine was weddings. I did weddings years and years ago in LA where I had a lot of mixed race weddings, so American and Japanese or Hispanic and American and whatever. And so having to wrangle people was really and get their attention and get them to listen to me and follow instructions and all that stuff. That was a big challenge. But I learned something when I got into the industry I'm in right now. And this is something really important for people who speak at places where the team members have to come. So it's a convention, it's a um, some place where the employee is brought but doesn't necessarily choose to come. So when you have associations like the Realtor Association or the Ortho Association, those people choose to come to that they pay to come to get educated.
Right.
All of their team members, if it's a seminar or something like that, don't. They're being paid to be there. And this is why this is important. When I totally understood that and realized that 90% of this audience would rather not be here today, that they're being paid to be here. It's not that they have animus about being there, but they don't have a choice to be there.
Yeah.
You have literally have a captive audience. Then you have to do something very quickly to help them feel like this is going to be worth their time. And this was better than their other options if they had any other options. And that's really important to get to real fast. So I make it a point to make sure they know, even though you might not have chosen to be here, and I don't say that because I don't want to bring that up, but I know that. But even though they didn't make the choice to be there, they were kind of being brought there. It's not only going to be worth their while, but they're going to take something home to their kids, to their spouse, to themselves that's going to enhance their life. And so that's just the intention as I walk out on stage. So I think that's how I try to connect with people so quickly and keep that energy there because I know I have to have it. I have to have that energy there for them.
Yeah. That just brought up this idea because I used to be a teacher. I taught Mandarin Chinese and theater. Absolutely loved it. Great breeding ground to figure out how to be a speaker
Wait, you taught Mandarin Chinese in theater?
and theater. both of those.
And theater. Okay. That
Yes.
I was gonna say, I don't know if there's a big market for Mandarin
Well,
Chinese in theaters, but
hey, you never know.
it's a niche.
It, very much so. No. So one of the things I think you do very well is pinpoint what are the problems or the challenges
Hmm.
that your audience has,
Hmm.
and make sure that you're solving the most high value challenges. Can you talk about how you prepare your talks to make sure that they're not just fluff and stuff, but they're actually, this is pointed, this is valuable, this is something that's going to solve a problem?
Yeah, I think it's something that's innate in me because I have dyslexia and my whole life has been trying to figure out how to shortcut to get to the win and
Okay.
how to break things down a lot easier. I love to simplify stuff. And so when I'm putting something together, and I'll there's sometimes I have stories where I'm like, how can I make this work? Like how can I make the point of the story be bigger and bolder? Because sometimes there's a story for story's sake, and I don't enjoy that. I'd rather have the story have a meaning behind it, and all stories have meanings. I get it, but sometimes it's a that would I'll listen to a speaker going, that was a random story that had nothing to do with anything that you're doing, but you liked the story, so you wanted to tell the story. So I try to break down it into very simple frameworks, outlines, something that's simple enough for them to take away and utilize. Um, I guess my answer really is because I have to do it for myself. It's really something I need to do for myself is to sometimes I'll even listen to other speakers or I'll listen to other programs and be like, man, they are so eloquent. Like the words they're using and the way that they're, I don't know, categorizing stuff. It's so cool and impressive to me. And then I think I am so not that person. And so for me, it's just as long as I can totally understand it and it makes sense and I can make it hooky and memorable.
Mhm.
Like one of my most popular speeches that I give in the orthodontic space is how to be an ideal team player and avoid being a staph infection, staph in quotes. So many people love that because of the title alone. And so now I just got to fulfill on that title, which by the way, is something that I do sometimes where I will create the title first. I actually learned this years ago from oh man, what's his name? He passed away a while ago, and it's gonna come to my his bald head. He was like a spiritual kind of guru guy, and oh, it's gonna drive me nuts.
I don't know.
Oh man, it's gonna come to my head. Okay. Anyways, he used to do this with his books when
Okay.
he would write Warren. No, not Warren. They used to, it'll come to me. He used to write his title first of his book and then have it printed out, like make a printed copy of the cover, and then have it sitting there while he was writing his book because now he's writing to the thing. I
Hmm.
do that a lot with speeches. I will come up with a title based upon what the need is of the client, and then I will build around the title so that it's just reinforced over and over again. And it also does a resolve. If that and that one, how to be an ideal team player and avoid being a staph infection, I've made a promise that I'm going to teach them this thing on how to. So I got to give them specific steps. So that's probably what I do mostly.
I love that. And honestly, that's one of the ways that I do a lot of the podcasts that I come up with. And the topics is
Yes, Scott. Thank you. Scott says Wayne Dryer.
Wayne Dyer. Oh,
Wayne
perfect. You got
Dyer.
it.
I
Thank you
said
so much. See, that's
Dryer.
why we have a live audience. That's it. Is so that we can
Scott, you're the man. Like that's awesome. I was just about ready to blow my head off, going like, "What is going on?"
that's awesome.
Sorry.
One of the other things I think you do really well is to be very present when you're on stage.
Hmm.
I don't remember what it was, but one time we were doing this training, and I think someone sneezed, and you're like, "Bless you," and you're like, "You've been blessed," or something like that. And it's something that I think in theater happens often when you have a moment, and instead of letting that moment just go away, if it adds
Yeah.
to your point, you bring it up.
Yeah.
So how do you balance this entertainment factor and the education factor so well? Because I think that's a skill that you have that's so good.
So you're right. It is a skill. It's a lot of time being on stage. What's interesting about the stage thing is this is as an actor, you're taught to ignore what's going on in the audience, right? As an actor, you don't break that fourth wall. And if you do, it becomes an SNL skit where they all break, right? So it becomes funny or whatever. But in general, you're not supposed to be doing that. So the difference on speaking is you need to break that fourth wall. As a matter of fact, if you're not breaking that fourth wall, if you're not focused on what's happening in the audience, you're missing out on really important parts that could help enhance. And there's something that a lot of speakers say, but I don't know. I'm not going to say anybody doesn't truly believe it, but I think maybe we forget it sometimes when we're on stage, which is if you're training the right stuff, if you're creating the right context for the situation, a lot more learning is going to happen in the audience within the audience than it will from you. It'll be from somebody leaning over like, wow, I never thought about it that way. And enhancing what their neighbor heard. Oh, what was that? Oh, let me see. Oh man, did you see that? And really helping each other. And then especially if you're doing exercises, some things that other people are going to say is going to pop it. But if you're not aware, what happens is, so the sneezing thing is a good example. That's so funny because it just happened this last weekend, twice. And if you if you if you don't hear it, that's one thing. I obviously there's gonna be sometimes you don't catch everything. I totally get that. But if it's something that you can connect with, you're actually showing the audience, I am here listening. I'm not just here to pontificate and give my speech and nothing can go wrong or get in the way. I tell speakers all the time, get in improv classes. Like get into improv classes and learn the yes and learn how to be quick off your feet. I was talking to a speaker once, very, very successful speaker, and he really gave me an insight because the way I love walking the tightrope. And this kind of goes to one of your questions earlier. I have I have a lot of content that I know I need to be able to be so familiar with my content that I can edit in my mind or edit in the moment if I'm running low on time or if something else distracts me and we want to go down that road. So if something happens in the audience, somebody asks a question that's really deep or unique, or I want to go down that rabbit hole, I can do that and still come back and bring it back and still end on time. Um, Being able to acknowledge to your audience that you are listening is so crucial. And yet so many speakers just get caught in their path of what they're doing. And this one speaker I was talking about was saying, I know where I'm blocked out. I know where I'm going to be during certain parts of this part of the speech. I know what I'm going to say here. And it's not necessarily like the choreograph that I was talking about earlier, but it is in some ways. And he was saying, man, if I didn't know what was going to happen, I'd freak out. Like that does not, I'd just doing anxiety. And for me, that's fun.
Mm.
For me, I did a training once about 2 years ago. And for whatever reason, there's a lot of stuff going on. I just couldn't get to the preparation of exactly what I wanted to do and all that stuff until the night before. And so I basically wrote a quick little outline using all the content and tools and stuff that I thought would be best for this company. It was a sales thing. And I went down there the next day. I did 8 hours of training with an hour lunch break the whole time. That was all I did to prepare the whole time. I had no PowerPoints, I had a flip chart, I had my outline. And when I got done, I felt so good. And I called Shannon and I'm like, wow, and I told her what happened. And she goes, well, Dino, you know your stuff. So why are you surprised? Like, you know your stuff. And it's so much better to be in a space of let the audience lead with what they need and then knowing, oh, I have a piece for that. Oh, I have a piece for that. And then being able to put those pieces together and then make it happen. So you have to break that fourth wall. You have to connect with them because if not, they're going to feel like you're so focused on your thing that you're not really there for them. You're there for you to show off your brilliance, to show off your stuff. So you have to have that space.
I think that was a great visual as well. Like when you're breaking that fourth wall, you are intentionally letting the audience in on the story, letting them in on the joke, letting them in to whatever the story or the ideas that you're sharing. And it's not about, hey, this is my story. This is our story, and it's inclusive.
Yeah.
And that's something I love about improv. And there are certain comedians that this is how they live their sets. Is they're like, I've got this specific thing that I want to talk about. Now I'm going to go into the audience and find someone that fits that. Like I was listening to Michael Jr. and he
Yeah,
has so many great bits where
it's
he's just
great.
working with the audience. And he has this idea. He's like, let's test this theory. And Woody Woodward does this really well as well. You do it so well when you're like, I know this is the framework that people are struggling with, and I know that there's these patterns. And then as you share these patterns, you start to see, oh, it's not just proven in my past; it's in this room. It's real. So what are your favorite patterns? If you could say, hey, this is my favorite speaking pattern. What's your favorite pattern that you connect with an audience on? And then it could even be a joke. I don't know. What's that one pattern like, oh man, this is something that I love to bring up. And maybe it's something that's super simple, but a pattern from the
Let,
audience, like to connect with them.
so what's a pattern that I like to work with them? I guess one pattern can I like taking people through kind of the thinking process. So I'll give them some data. I'll say, hey, here's some idea of what I'm talking about. Here's a breakdown. And then depending on time, I can't always do this, but if I can, I love it, is I will then switch them to do some sort of thinking exercise for themselves, even if it's just 60 seconds,
Mhm.
and make them write something down to integrate it into their brain. And then we'll talk about it. We'll throw some stuff out there. And this is where the audience work comes, because you'll have, I call it popcorn. I'm saying, hey, just pop up and tell me something. Tell me what you wrote down, or who would like to volunteer, and it allows me to do some crowd work that way. But it also makes everybody, anytime you can help people get out of their normal thinking pattern and think about something else, or something that puts it deeper into their brain, which hearing from other people and you saying, oh yeah, me too, or oh, I didn't think about that, it totally integrates it more into the brain.
Mhm.
So that's a really fun pattern. Anything, I mean, I start a lot of my speeches off with doing whatever I can. I feel like there's very specific ways you can start a speech, or that you need to start a speech, and there's very specific things you don't do. But one of the things that I love to do is to give them something to do in that first 60 seconds that I get on stage, because it makes them now think of themselves.
Yeah.
And everyone's favorite topic is ourselves. So if I'm having that, even if it's something that's hard for them, it's now taking the onus off of me for that 60 seconds for me to be able to survey the crowd, see where my hot pockets are. What I mean by that is where the energy is high, where the energy is low, where the person's like Mr. Grumpy or whatever. Like I can see all that in that 60 seconds, but I'm having them do a lot of one is my finger trick that I do where I'll have people do stuff. Yeah.
I remember.
Because it now makes them think two things, which is really powerful. Number one, they're thinking about themselves. But number two, when they first can't do it, and everybody who's watching right now, if you're doing this right now, you'll know, like if you can or can't do it, and you're probably flipping me off somehow accidentally, right? Because you don't, because it's not a trick, it's an exercise that I've learned. And what it does is it ingrains in their brain, oh, he knows something I don't.
Mhm.
And so I automatically open up the door for opportunity in their brain. Opportunity that I just might be able to help them with something, or teach them something, or this isn't going to be the same thing. So that's one way to really integrate it into their brain. But yeah, having them do stuff is really crucial. Tony Robbins says it best, right? Your state, like get out of your state, change your state, and if whatever we can do to help them change their state, the better.
And if I can rephrase what you said with that framework, I think it's so good because I've heard you multiple times talk about it. So you start with your data and then you
Yeah.
do an exercise. And that exercise
Yep.
can look so many different ways. And then you have
Yep.
like a small pair share or something where they integrate in a small way and then
Yep.
the whole group. I've done that in this. I mean, anytime you guys are on my calls, I use that framework. It's so useful because it's simple and because we can interact with different people and learn different things. It always feels fresh. I love.
So, Brigham, you have like 20 kids or something like that, right? How many kids do you have?
I am from Utah, not quite 20. Not
Okay.
I've got four.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, have you ever done it with your kids?
Yeah. I do it
It's the
quite often with
greatest.
my kids. It's so fun to hear their little
It's
review.
so good to do it with your kids. Like your kids, like teach them some. Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to think about this or write a little, draw a picture or whatever, and then all right. So then you share with me. It's so funny. I used to do it in church assignments. Everywhere. Like it's just a framework you can use literally whenever I'm running low on time or somebody wants me to do something really quickly, I automatically go to the framework, go, okay, how can I incorporate this into what I'm gonna do? Yep, yep, yep. Matter of fact, 2 weekends ago at my mastermind, I
Mhm.
was asked spontaneously to lead a a needs exercise. Like, okay, there's like 27 people in the room. What does everybody need? What are they looking for in their business? And those can get number one, people can go off on tangents, right? They could be like, oh, well, let me tell you my backstory and I'm gonna tell my forward story and my wish and my dream. And you have 5 minutes and here cut to 20 minutes later, right? And we had an hour for all these people. I was like, there's no way this is happening. So I went real fast and I used the framework and I just wrote down. I made him do this, I made him do that, and then I created it and we got through that thing in 66 minutes. Right.
Wow.
So yeah, it works in everything.
It's so useful. Like how many times do we get so focused on only the data portion that we're like, are we going to get into the application? That's an
Yeah.
exercise. Are we going to get to the how can I teach it to someone else or share some different ideas? Because that's when you're really engaging your audience. One of my favorite things about theater is it's not just about what's happening to you, right? It's not a movie, but it's happening around you, right?
Mm,
And it's bringing you into that experience. And I think that's a key. Something that you do super well is to
yeah.
let your audience feel connected because they are connected.
Yep.
It They can choose to disconnect if they want, but it's
Yep.
really hard to disconnect if you're doing the cha-cha or something.
Yeah.
And everyone in the audience is doing it.
Well, you heard me talk about this, that I really believe that context is way more important than content.
Oh yeah.
That the way you set up the room, the rules, the seating, the music, the way
Mm.
you set up the energy of the room is way more important than the content that you have. But so many people focused all their effort and energy on content. Do you want to have good content? Absolutely. But again, we go back to the overindulging in content because it becomes about you. Let me show you how smart I am. Let me show you all the information I have. Let me show you all the ways that you can work with me. But just like anything, you just want to give them the taster. You also want it to be about them. And context then says, if I'm going to say this is about you, we're going to work with you and not just on my stuff the whole time. And by the way, how much you can do with audience interaction really depends on the timing that you have
Yeah.
because you want to make it useful. But you gotta be a really good editor in your head because you never know. The thing about speaking, which is fascinating, is there are so many factors that are not in your control, especially if you're speaking with other people on stage too, where you're at a conference or something like that. Somebody goes over, the AB goes down, you have no PowerPoint. There's so many factors. You've got to be nimble. You've got to be nimble.
Something that you brought up that resonated with me was if it's all about you as the presenter, then you kind of miss the boat. If it's all about your audience and you make them feel smart, you make them feel like, oh, I've made these connections,
Yep.
then they take something away from it. It's way different than you saying, hey, look how smart I am. Here's all the things I know. It's what is it that you know? How can I help elevate them to see what's possible? So to summarize here, what would be one piece of advice that you wish you had as a speaker and as a business owner that maybe
Mm.
took years to discover? What's that one piece of advice you'd give?
Um, this is gonna sound so generic and cheesy, and I'll explain it. Like, don't try to be someone else in your speech. Just be as authentic as you can about who you are. So I have this thing I call the USP. A lot of people call it the unique selling proposition. No, it's your unique stage presence. And oftentimes we'll see speakers, we'll see people out there who have a gimmick. There's a old song back from I think it's the 20s. It's called "You Got to Have a Gimmick If You Want to Get Ahead," and
From Gypsy, right?
From gypsy, that's right. And so there's a bit of a truth to that in the sense of show business. Some people in show business, their gimmick is, looking incredibly good looking, right? Some of them are looking odd and weird, like Steve Buscemi, right? You make a great career out of looking weird. But you got to know what your unique stage presence is. And it starts with being authentically you and not being someone else. And the lesson that I had to learn on that was when I first started to learn how to speak on stages. I was working with a company where you had to be like the guy who was the head of the company. Even to this day, I know some of the trainers who, even though that company is no longer around, would be like all they are is him. You see him and the tonality, the way that even the stories are his stories. I had to tell some other guy's story that wasn't mine, and I lost myself in that. And I think a lot of times we as speakers see somebody who's doing amazing and like, I want to be like that. A classic example of this is really intense motivational speakers
Mhm.
fall into the trap that if I'm yelling, I'm inspiring because I've got all this energy and I'm just screaming at the crowd and I'm telling them what to do and you can do it too. And yet, when you see real inspirational speakers out there, do they have a change in their volume? Yes, but they know how to play with it like a good orchestra, pulling you in, pushing you back,
Amen.
instead of just intense the whole time. You can do it and shouting. Like if you're shouting at me, after about 2 minutes, I'm kind of done, and most people are too, even if you're trying to be inspirational. So you got to know how to do that. So I was not authentically me. I was this other person. And it was my wife who, after seeing me perform and do a training that was my own training, I
Yeah.
just brought that stuff into my stuff. She came up and she was like, I want you to know, I don't like you on stage anymore. She's like, you are not like you when you think you're being funny, you're being like kind of sarcastic and cutting. When you think you're being inspirational, you're yelling. I just don't like your personality on stage. And she was 1,000% correct.
Mm.
So the one thing, man, know who you are and do not be afraid that's who it is. Don't try to put on some other airs. Don't try to be the people that you've seen out there. It's real easy to look at somebody like Woody, who is masterful at speaking, right? I mean, and everybody here sees him and does his thing, and the way he comes up with examples and the research he does for his stuff. You learn from Woody and you go, okay, there are elements to what Woody does that I want to do too. I want to be able to command the stage that way. I want to have real clear slides the way that he does, right? Breaks down information very well. I want to do that. But how do I make that uniquely mine? How do
Mm.
I do that myself? How do I not try to be Woody or Dino or Tony Robbins or whatever and just own it? And if you really look at the people who are killing it right now in the information marketing space, whether it be Alex Hormozy or Tony or Dean Graziosi, they're very uniquely themselves. They're like other people, but they're uniquely themselves. So,
And that's something that nobody else on the planet is. You get to
right.
be you speak in your own tonality, your own voice, and you bring all of the experiences that you have from life, and you can find those moments that will connect with your audience.
Yeah.
And I think that's sage advice. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us today. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I went by fast.
It was so much fun. So Dino, thank you so much. Man, I look up to you so much. I mean, not
Oh,
literally
I really
in
appreciate
front
that.
of me, but I absolutely love you. I appreciate you.
Are you
You
going to be there next month at my thing? I need to have, I need to give you a discount code for my, I'm doing a 3-day training.
is it at Renatus Corporate or where is
No,
it?
I'm doing it actually my own. I'm building a
Oh,
studio
cool.
in my house to do it, but
Oh,
it's going to be broadcast. It's going to be a virtual 3-day training that like $97 for anybody who wants to come. And
well,
it's,
I definitely going to be there. That sounds awesome.
I will be sending out my email list to everybody and I'll be posting on Facebook because it's going to be something I don't think has really been done that well in our space. But 3 days for $97 to get and I want as many. My goal is to get 200 people there, and it's going to be a party for 3 days. But you're going to learn so much. I'm just so excited about it.
Well, way cool. And if I can be there physically, if you need me to be there, that would be so much fun. So yeah,
And May,
The
that's what I should tell you. It's May 30th, 31st, and June 1st. So,
30th, 31st, and June 1st.
yep,
Cool.
yep.
I will mark that on the calendar. Guys, uh, I'll put this in the show notes as well, because I'm sure you have some information about that. We'll put it in the show
Yep.
notes when we get this cut
Yep.
up. But once again, Dano, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and effort. You're such a great example of what's possible when you take your background and you say, how do I make the very best of what I have from my
Oh,
skill?
thanks.
I just love it. So thank you so much. Guys, keep following this for more Leveling Up podcasts. Feel free to hit like and subscribe. We want to make sure this message gets out to so many more people. I'm going to stop the live stream, but thank you so much. And then if
People
you
are
guys
asking questions
have
here.
questions, what questions?
Yeah.
Do we have? Okay, that
On the recording,
ask room for the recording.
there will
I'll
be
get the
a
recording to this probably within 2 or 3 days. My virtual assistant was sick this last week, so he's got 2 that he has to cut up first. But within the week, it'll be done.
nice.
So
For my thing with the 3 days, you will get the recording if you're part of the VIP, but not for 90 days after the event, because we're really encouraging people to be there live. What am I offering? It's a 3-day virtual event. It's called Stand and Deliver. It'll be on May 30th through June 1st. If you're on my email list, if you're not, just go to dinowatt.com, get on my email list, or email me at dino@dinowatt.com, and we'll get you there on it, and we'll get you all the information there. The website's not live yet because we're not doing a release until anyways, we have a plan for it. So yeah.
that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dino. I'm really excited to be on there with you. I think that will be a great training and really great to connect with you over and
Awesome.
over again. So I appreciate you so much for being on today. And guys, I hope you guys got a ton of value from this like I did today. And it was fun to have you online today. So have a wonderful rest of your day, Dino.
Thank you.
God bless.
Bye-bye.